right. Well, good morning, everyone. Probably been here listening, but I'm in Las Vegas this morning talking with you from the other side of the country, literally, which I don't know, maybe it's a sign of age, but I'm always kind of tickled by the way these things work these days, where we can literally be anywhere in the world and connect in and talk with someone
Yes.
else face to face anywhere else in the world. It's quite striking to me. Um, As many of you know, just to kind of update you, I was in Colorado for the last 2.5 years doing that experiment. It's going well. There's a group of people there who are meeting and now looking for a permanent space to meet in. And we have talked to Swami Satchimananda about being our caretaker for that effort there, and he has agreed and is moving in that direction. And I have been posted to the Santa Barbara Center, so I'll be turning up there later today, actually, and I'll be there until that posting changes into something different. On my way, I just stopped here in Las Vegas at the request of Swami Sarvadevananda and also the inspiration of my own heart here, actually, to get to know the devotees here and to share some ideas and thoughts. And we've done that the last couple of days, and now we're running off to Santa Barbara. And a lot of this talk this morning, it comes from that space. I've spoken in the past that the last 2 years I've really been working on an exercise of learning to live on a point and not on a line. And so to always take the moment as all that I have and to let the moment define itself without my mind intruding to project my story onto the moment, but just to be present and to allow the moment to be enough, to not be looking for anything externally, not running after anything, not considering my future or my past. That's been my practice, and I bring it up because it's been an incredible um, fortuitous thing that I've been working on that, because I have to say in the last 6 weeks, Mother has really forced me to live in that situation. The work finished at Colorado. We didn't really know what was the next step, where we were going to go from there. And so Bellarmont invites me to come to see them. So I go to see them. And on the first day that I'm there, or second day actually, I have a meeting with the general secretary. And the sole purpose of that meeting was to set up another meeting in which I would find out what my posting was. But I was going to be at Bellarmont for a month, and this was the second day that I was there, and they scheduled the meeting for 3 weeks later. so, so I was going to be at Bellarmont for 3 weeks, just kind of waiting for a meeting that was going to happen to find out what my posting was. And I wasn't at Bellarmont for any personal reason. I'd been asked to come there, and so it was such an interesting thing to have to let go in my mind as to what was up, what am I supposed to do, where am I supposed to be, what am I supposed to be, accomplishing. To let go of all of that and just to be comfortable just being at Bellarmont and being able to spend the time in meditation and whatnot. But then when that meeting day finally came, uh, over the course of 3 or 4 days, I thought my posting was going to be Mayavati. I thought my posting was going to be Vivekananda University. I thought my posting was going to be Paris, France. I thought my posting was going to be Hollywood. I thought my posting could be San Francisco. And I was told at different times, or asked at different times if any of those postings would be all right. And just the amount of surrender that I have been learning and being taught has been incredible. They ended up returning to the idea of me coming to Hollywood, but then and so I contacted Swami Sarvadevananda to ask him, where should I show up, because Hollywood has all those sub centers, and I was just wondering where do I go? And he says, oh, we'll talk about it. So even after I got back from India, I didn't really know exactly what my posting was going to be, and I didn't find out until this last week. And I was kind of surprised at what an effect that had on mind. Having no idea what I was doing, where I was going, and what my future was going to be in actuality. And it really showed me how strongly we rely on our projections for the future for our narrative, for our sense of purpose, for our sense of place in the world. And this living on a point reduces all of that. You know, you lose everything. It really is the one grand renunciation. If you can actually live just in the moment, that is the same as that grand renunciation that Ramakrishna was talking about, you know, and what Holy Mother also says, you know, that she says you can have your realization this moment if you want it. You know, that this grand renunciation of letting go of your whole story, because that is actually what happens when you step into the moment, be in the point, and not on the line, is that you have to renounce your ego utterly and completely, because your ego is composed entirely of the past. You know, and so if you are living in your ego self, which means, how do you know whether you are or not? When you're living in ego self, you're living in the mind. You have placed the thought of yourself in the mind, and you live as the thought of yourself among all of the other thoughts of your mind. And that puts you on this spectrum of delusion. When you act as the thought of yourself rather than what happens when there's no thought, when there's silence of the mind and the self acts spontaneously from its inspiration of its divine principle, the principle of Satchitananda that lies within us. And so this living on the point and letting go of any narrative about the moment, but really sitting in the moment and gathering what is available to you and what is being presented to you, to gather that together, create beauty, offer it to God, offer it to the divine, to offer it to the universe, however you want to speak of those things, and gather the next series of things to create beauty. And that your moment is just this continual loop of looking around, seeing what the divine has given you to apply your superpower to, which is Satchitananda, right? To look around you and find what are the elements of this moment to which I can apply my superpower of Satchitananda to create something beautiful, to offer back to God, to the world at large, to my being. And that just a steady repetition of this process is what will produce the deepest sense of life in you, the deepest sense of faith in you. Because coming to the moment is coming to the divine. We have the I am, which is the moment, which is the name of God. And so in talking this morning about Brother Lawrence, I bring all of that on in because the idea of living on a point in the moment and being just purely aware of the I am is a very Gyannic practice. And I know that there's a lot of people at the center there that are Gyanis that like that practice of the toward the Advaita ideal. And but the thing is that the division between those, it, I'm going to posit, let me do it that way. I'm going to posit to you the idea that these two paths are not so very different. And that Brother Lawrence's practice, which is purely practice of a bhakta, is not nonsense for a jnani. That there are ways of changing words and looking at the concepts of what's being done, so that you can understand that there is a path of Jnana Bhakti that is not in conflict with one another. And so I want to go through the teachings of Brother Lawrence this morning with a sensitivity to that, but kind of drawing out and demonstrating how not only are all the world's religions a singularity, a one, but that also the four paths in some ways can be thought of as being very similar or being one. And the means of doing that is always to abstract what is being accomplished or what needs to be accomplished out from how it's being accomplished. And then once you know what's trying to be done, you can look at any of the four paths and see that all four paths are trying to do the same thing, but in different methodologies, but that the task is the same. What we need to do is to break out of our egoism. Egoism is Maya. They are the same thing. Egoism is what blocks you in this moment right now from going into ecstasy because you're in the presence of God. Your ego, and what is the ego? Ego isn't just being proud or arrogant. That's the way we often use that word. But ego simply means that you believe yourself to exist separate and apart from the whole. It means that you have taken the universe and said, that's over there and I'm here. It's another way of saying that is you've taken all that you do not know and placed it outside of yourself, and all that you intimately know you have placed within yourself. And so you've put this picket of fence around that we've talked about many times, and anything on the inside of that picket fence, that's me. And that's my world, and I get to make those decisions. And anything that's outside that picket fence, well, we deal with it, however it comes at us. Right? And what we have to do is remove that picket fence completely, to not settle for a singular perspective, but to open the heart, open the mind, find our nature as spirit and not as boundaried matter or boundaried thought, but to identify ourselves with spirit and to expand with that notion of spirit, and that the identity of spirit is silence. And what happens with the identity of silence in our situation? Well, the divine principle within is activated and expresses through that clarity an idea or an ideal of God, of the beloved, of the one without a second. And so Brother Lawrence, and I'm going to go through his fourth conversation, if you're following along in the book, or if you want to read it yourself at some point. I'm just going to jump in here. We're just going to go through it piece by piece and look at this. The he that is being mentioned here in third person is Brother Lawrence. This is written by some of the people that met him at the time and had a conversation with him, and they're recalling that conversation. So the Brother Lawrence discoursed with me very frequently and with great openness of heart concerning his manner of going to God, whereof some part is related already. So I love how he describes his conversation with Brother Lawrence, because I think this is the ideal for you and me. Yes, Uma. Hope you're muted. You're muted, Uma. There we go.
What's the name of the book?
Oh, the name of the book is The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence.
Thank you.
Yes. And it's a very short book. It's available for free online from many places in many translations. And it's a delightful look at
repeat the title.
The Practice of the Presence of God.
Thank you.
Yes. Which actually, I would say that that's a nice title for life. That is what life is. And so we look at our speaker here, or our friend who's talked to Brother Lawrence, and the thing that marked a conversation with Brother Lawrence, what you would remember about it, is this great openness of heart. That is the mark of a great devotee. The mark of a great person is that he sits there and talks with great openness about accomplishments, about things that he's doing or is going to be doing, and whatnot. But the idea of the great devotee is to speak with great openness of heart. There's nothing hidden in there. They are moving toward that notion that my words, my conduct, and my thoughts are always the same. That I'm not duplicitous, I'm not calculating, I'm not sitting there using the moment to create something for myself, but I'm using the moment to create something beautiful, to give out. And so he has this, that he spoke with them frequently with great openness of heart about what? About manners of going to God, about manners of finding the wealth of meaning for this experience of being, to get an idea of what we are, to get an idea of who we are. And interestingly enough, Sri Nisargadatta says that question, who am I, was never intended to be answered. He said it's a question that dissolves the asker. The question dissolves the asker. And as we search and find this, we find that this particular point of perspective that we have identified with is not who we are, but that we are a universal collection of all perspectives simultaneously. So anyway, he's having this conversation with Brother Lawrence, and he says, he told me that everything, that all consists in one hearty renunciation of everything which we are sensible does not lead to God. Right? So anything that we find that is not leading us toward love, that is not leading us toward wisdom, that is not tending toward contentment in the moment, anything that doesn't do that, we just simply in one foul swoop push it off the table. We just renounce it utterly and completely. That's the ideal. That's what we want to work toward. That everything consists in one hearty renunciation of everything which we are sensible does not lead to God. That we might accustom ourselves, right? And that means practice. That we might accustom ourselves to a continual conversation with him. Now, as I took this and began practicing, I was thinking that this idea of my highest ideal has to become the focal point of my thinking, right? And so that throughout the day, when we're thinking to ourselves, we want to be accustomed to thinking in the presence of the self, thinking in the presence of God, of the ideal, so that we don't just have our internal conversation. We're not just walking around thinking, oh, look at that beautiful flower. Oh, I love flowers. Oh, I love coffee. Oh, I love this. Oh, well, let's do that. Oh, I feel like this. Instead of living like that, live like, look at that beautiful flower. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. I can't believe that you made that flower just for me to find in this moment and to start this conversation with you. Or to sit there as somebody asks you a question, and instead of just referencing your mind right away and giving your egoistic response, offer the question to mother. Say, Ma, look, this person's asking you this. And just in your own self, be silent for just a brief, moment that's not perceived by the person you're talking to. Take a moment and just give the opportunity for the inspiration of the presence to have a space to speak within you. Give a section of your mind to silence. If you can't silence the whole thing, give a section of it to it for a brief moment to silence, to literally query the divine principle within, rather than querying mind, right? And this will help you to learn to live in the present, in the I am, rather than in the thought of yourself, which happens only in mind. We've talked in the past that mind is Shakti, when it's disturbed with the thoughts of me and mine. If there's any element, even a single drop of me or mine in the universal mind creates a great uproar called the universe that you live in. The manifested universe suddenly comes into being when you put a single drop of me and mine in the mind. And after that drop has been added to pure mind, and now you've got the universe, that's Shakti. The mind is the universe of constant, unrepeating change. And so to know ourself, we have to move out of the thought of ourself and into the spontaneous manifestation of the divine principle within us, right? The other way to say that is to move your idea of yourself out of your head related to other ideas and thoughts and place it in the heart. In the shrine there, in the presence of the divine image of God that has been placed there, that gives us our very sense of being. It's actually what we build our ego on, right? It's that motivation of love, the motivation to express, to manifest that's in us. So he says, accustom yourself to a continual conversation with the divine, with your divine ideal inside. Right? And if you want to put this in a Gyani term, it's to sit in the presence of I am, to be aware of awareness, right, within yourself. And to anything that takes you out of that awareness of self, that awareness of I am, the awareness of yourself as observer, renounce it. Anything that gets in the way of that, anything that pulls you into a narrative, renounce it. Right? So that we might accustom ourselves to a continual conversation with him with freedom. All right? With freedom and with simplicity, which means that this is the one time that you get to run around the shrine in your socks. I guess we do that all the time, but you can where you I won't fix that. I'll just stick with it. Where you can be when you're in the shrine of the heart, that's your shrine. That's where you and your beloved meet and sit in whatever manner. For you, I have a little old oak tree that sits in a meadow next to a little stream, and God, the divine, my ideal of that, is always sitting under that tree, waiting for me to come and just sit there and spend time in that space. And so in this conversation, this place in the mind, learn to live with freedom, right? With just an openness and a clear expression. Don't let things go through the hampering censorship of the mind, or the artist of the mind who's always trying to formulate an idea, formulate a plan, formulate something down the road. Stay simple, stay free, stay in the moment. Enjoy the divine presence, and always keep your part of that conversation as short as possible, and show God as much as possible. Develop an attitude of open awareness within, where you're not forcing yourself to think everything, but you're standing in a more general space in your mind where you can observe everything. When you try and force everything through the thought channel, that pulls you into narrative almost immediately. So you want to stand back in your mind, have a conversation of simplicity and freedom with the divine constantly there, just by sharing every thought and every idea that passes. Have it pass through the awareness of the presence, that you're with God within, looking at the mind, your mind. And you don't have to tell him everything, or her, or that. Everything that's in the mind, that's self-evident to the beloved, to the divine, because he's actually your mind before you are. And so part of that conversation is you coming to understand the intimacy of the reality of the presence and you. He says that we need only to recognize God intimately present with us, to address ourselves to him in every moment, that we may beg his assistance for knowing his will in things doubtful. Right? Another way of saying knowing his will is just knowing what's the best thing to do right now. What's the best thing to say right now? What's the best thing to manifest right now? And to always have that awareness, processing things like that, and surrendering that question to the divine principle. What does love do in this situation? What does wisdom do in this situation? And allow that to happen. And he says here, so address ourselves to him every moment, that we may beg his assistance for knowing his will in things doubtful, and for rightly performing those which we plainly see he requires of us. Right? To rightly perform means to do it in the understanding of your nature as Satchitananda. This is how love acts, right? And we pulled in 1 Corinthians 13. Do you remember that? For a good verses 3 through 8 in that chapter, for a wonderful description of love. So if you're ever wondering what would love do in this situation, and love is too much of a blanket term, you can go to that scripture in Corinthians and look at this description of love and see, that's how love acts. That's how love is. Right? And that we should offer them to him before we do them, and giving him thanks when we have done them. Right? So all the things that you are doing in the moment, or allowing to happen within yourself in the moment, we offer them to him immediately. Why? Because we don't want them to make them part of our narrative. I did this. I had a great meditation. I gave away $100 to a beggar. I said a nice thing to a person today. If we start crediting the ego self with the accomplishments of our moment, then we're building ego, right? And if you're building ego, you're building your Maya. And it's a very tricky thing that if we start building ego on our spiritual practices, uh, that's a very, I chuckle out of nervousness really, because that is one of the most difficult situations to get out of, because all of the tools that are meant to get you out of it, you have misused in order to build it. So at that time, a lot of times, a guru will tell you to stop your practice, to stop it for a while, and or to do something else besides meditation, you know, so that we don't build ego by identifying with our practice. That's why every time we finish a meditation, we are gracious to the beloved that we have the opportunity. We offer it to the beloved, and we remember that we are not the doer, that everything that changed in me, all the bliss or wonder that I may have experienced in that meditation, was a gift. It was a love letter from the divine, and not to take credit for it, to not to think that it was a result of anything, because your ultimate realization is the only thing that is not a result. It is the only effect with no cause, according to Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, anyway. So Brother Lawrence goes on and says that in this conversation with God, we are also employed in praising, adoring, and loving him incessantly for his infinite goodness and perfection. One of the ways that you can use, I'll share with a one that I've shared before, is this idea of not forgetting in your day to be constantly on the lookout for these little vignettes of beauty that are hidden in the details right around you, even in this moment in the room you're in, and to pay attention to these vignettes of beauty as reminders of the love of God. Right. And this was how I learned to live in Calcutta. Calcutta, when I went there in 2012 and lived there for 6 months, it was quite a challenging environment. It was quite different from what I'd ever lived in before. And at first it was a challenge because I couldn't see anything but the obvious, the pollution and some of the trash and some of the decay. And I was noticing that all the time, and it was causing me some trouble. And so I decided I would go and buy a camera uh, at the nearby store, and that every afternoon I would take a walk with the idea of taking pictures of a beautiful thing. And it changed the way that I walked around Calcutta. Instead of being blocked by noticing all the easy stuff, the challenging stuff, I looked past that in search of beauty. And by doing that, I put together a little album of images called Colors of Calcutta that I did just purely as a practice. And it changed my whole experience of Calcutta. I realized what a beautiful town that is. And I realized that as a photographer, there's almost no better place in the world to go. There are opportunities of pictures and beauty there that you will not see anywhere else in the world. And so this is the manner of living, that when we are always in conversation with the divine, we should always be looking for evidence of love, for opportunities of love, for expressions of wisdom. And we look for where they reflect in the room around us. We don't forget to be reminded about the presence by everything beautiful that we see, um, even the things that we desire, to share them with the Lord and look at them and understand that it is the presence of the beloved that makes that thing beautiful, and to ruminate on that, so that we sit in this constant reflection of the presence, and turn everything that comes through the senses as into an offering, into a conversation with the presence within, and that anything that's inspired by that is what is done through you, in the moment. He says that our sanctification did not depend upon our changing works, right? So it's not our works and the changing things that we do that make us pure. It's not the fact that we sit to meditate that brings us to realization, right? He says that our sanctification does not depend upon our changing our works, but in doing that work for God's sake. This is how things become pure, right? Because what's the meaning of purity? It's the lack of me and mine, right? A thing becomes pure when me and mine is removed from it. And so in this constant conversation with the beloved, in this constant clearing out the dirt of egoism from the light of awareness that expresses, that gives us the love that motivates us, that makes us act in this world, that we try and remove as much of the dust and furniture off of that lens as possible, so that it can be expressed in that clear, non-egoistic way. And so the way that that is done is that we begin to do everything not for its result, but as an offering of love. And so if you're sitting there filling out a DMV form, I always like that one because it's the most mundane thing I can think of. You're sitting there filling out the DMV form, you do that as worship. Well, how can you possibly fill out a DMV form as worship? Well, you do it with your full attention. You write very neatly. You answer the questions completely. You do it in a very careful, methodical way with your full attention. And when you hand it to the attendant, you look in her eye for just a moment, or his eye for just a moment. You acknowledge the presence of your beloved there, and you offer your DMV form to the DMV god across the counter. And you carry on. Now, I don't know how all of this strikes you. It might strike you as humorous or naive, but I can tell you the only way it has struck me is with an injection of beauty into being that has cured a depression that laid on my mind for many years, that has cured an insecurity about speaking with people, about being in public. It has expressed itself in me in an openness of being able to talk to a complete stranger as if I've always known them. This is the value of this practice. It is not naive. It is not nonsense emotionalism. It's not an imaginary friend. It's an acknowledgement of an inner reality that is often ignored by the ego because it threatens the ego. Right? So understand that just being aware of the presence, just bringing yourself into a constant conversation with your highest ideal, your constant remembrance of isness, of this moment, this effort to eliminate, I guess the way of saying it that I've said in the past, instead of saying forget your past, forget your future, and just be present now, which is really what we're saying. But you can also say, don't let the not here, not now, infect your here and now, right? Which means if you're sitting in this room right now and your boss chastised you earlier, that boss is not in the room with you right now. So that chastisement should not be in the mind right now. And you're ruminating about it and feeling about it and calculating about it. That is what you renounce. That's narrative. You let that go, because that will take care of itself when you see your boss the next time and you're in the space of Satchitananda. That knowing and that awareness of being Satchitananda in the presence of your boss will ensure that what you say is proper, and will assure that what you say is true, and will assure that it will be perfectly navigated, because you are in a state of awareness. You're not in a state of ego where you're just acting out of past, right? Out of memory. He says that the most excellent method he had found of going to God was that of doing our common business without any view of pleasing men, and, as far as we are capable, purely for the love of God. Right? So, and the way Karma Yoga would say that is just don't do it for its result. Do it for its own sake, whatever you're doing. Right? My best example of this, and the thing that helped me realize this the most, was I remember back when I was a novice, when I was a brahmachari in San Francisco, and I was the only I was the only brahmachari in the monastery at that time, so I got to do all the fun work. I had to clean all the toilets, and I had to clean the shrine, and I had to weed the gardens. I did all of that stuff, all mundane stuff, all stuff that loses meaning quite quickly. And I remember one day, we had this beautiful little cupola shrine in the monastery shrine room. And it had thousands of little lotus leaves and 100 million little intricate this, that's, and the others, carved into it all over it. And so I had to dust this thing every day. And the way that I had been trained to dust it was to take a handkerchief, and to fold it so that the corner becomes sharp and pointy. And then I can go through every single lotus leaf all over that shrine and just wiggle that little handkerchief there and clean it. And then I could get all of the trim work and all of the gingerbread work around the bottom and then up inside the cupola and back corners and all that. Wonderful. A real pain in the patoot, though. And I had to do it every single day. And one day, after 6 years, I'm very happy that it took me 6 years to arrive at this point. But after 6 years, I literally sat on the shrine, the literally on the shrine platform itself, not just up with it, but on the shrine, right next to mother's picture, mother's cupola. And I sat there and I just leaned on my elbows and I was holding the Kleenex or that hanky in my hand, and I just turned to mother and I just told her, and this is what he's talking about here. He says, when in freedom and frankness we talk to God. I just told mother, I was like, I am so sick and tired of this, mother. I said, this room is by far the cleanest room in this monastery, and it is the only room that I am continuously cleaning when it doesn't need it. I said, I could easily come in here and do this once every 2 weeks, and nobody would notice, not even you. I don't need to dust the leaves of the lotus every day. And I sat there, with mother and reasoned this out of my mind. And what actually came to me in that conversation in my mind at that day, mother said to me, the reason that this work is so hard for you is because you only do it to get it done. You're never here with me while you're doing it. You're just here doing your job to get it finished. And she said to me, what kind of joy is going to come out of that? What kind of satisfaction comes out of that? And I tell you, from that day forward, and quite honestly, from that day forward, I turned my time in cleaning the shrine from being the putzfrau or the cleaning lady for the shrine. I changed that identity into being a companion of the beloved and taking care of the room that they live in. And when I'm in there, I'm talking. When I'm in there, I'm sharing. When I'm in there, I'm singing. When I'm in there, I'm playing. When I'm in there, I'm teasing, flirting, just having my time with my God in my way, where no one else in the world has an opinion about it. And that is how we live. And in that is such a freshness and such a joy, And so when he says this is the most excellent method of changing the way we live our life, it's not changing what we do, right? You don't have to go change your job and become a volunteer teacher at an orphanage's girls' school in Timbuktu. You can take your job right there at the McDonald's and make it holy by doing it in the company of the presence. And just that will teach you so much more about what's going on in that job than anything else you could practice. Just simply having that awareness. It will lead you to many beautiful experiences, many beautiful insights. He says that it is a great delusion to think that the times of prayer ought to differ from other times, right? He says that it is a great delusion for you to think that the condition of your mind during your practice should be different from the state of your mind the rest of the day. It's a great delusion to think that the times of prayer ought to differ from other times, that we are as strictly obliged to adhere to God by action in time of action as by prayer in its season. Right? What he's saying here is that your whole life is your practice, everything. And it's not what you're doing, but how you're doing it. And the how means with awareness, with presence, not just running through the routines of mind, which just spit out routines from the past. Oh, this is how I did it. This is how I do it. And not lost in the future. Oh, I'm doing it to get this, or I'm doing it to finish it. Right? But stay present, stay aware, stay alert. If you're a Jnani, you're staying alert of I am, of your being, which means that you're eliminating narrative descriptions that the mind is running by, thoughts about the moment. You discard those, right? And you be aware of the I am, aware of your awareness. And for the bhakta, you just have your divine beloved sitting right there in the mind, sharing every thought, sharing every observation, sharing every sensation. And that presence never leaves you, and that is what helps you not to be led down certain paths of delusion. He says that his prayer was nothing else but a sense of the presence of God. That is what mature prayer is. In the beginning, prayer is a conversation, and you're talking incessantly because you're nervous and you don't know what else to do. And you're so uncomfortable with silence that you just can't manage to keep your mind quiet, right? That's why I know it. Growing up in my house, the TV was on not 24/7, but it was on from like 6 a.m. to like 10 p.m., even if nobody was in the house. And I remember asking my mother one time, I was like, why is the television on all the time? There's nobody in there. And she says, oh, I just like the background noise. You see how our delusions get to us, how our addictions get to us. Oh, I can't stand a quiet house. Why? Because we're not at peace with ourselves. We're not at peace with ourselves. And if we're not being distracted somehow, we have to live with that. That's a very difficult place to live, right? That's why desire is such a challenge, because desire is distraction. It takes us out of our discomfort so that it doesn't get taken care of. It takes us away from our lack of inner peace so that we don't actually solve the lack of inner peace. We just learn to not look at it, right? And this is how we become imbalanced people that are easily pushed around, easily angered, easily made jealous, easily saddened, right? Because we live in a very delicate world of not dealing with the silence inside and accepting that silence and learning to appreciate and to love that wonderful silence. So prayer is nothing else but a sense of the presence of God, his soul being at that time insensible to everything but divine love. You see, that is what it means to be in the presence of the beloved. It is a divine love. And even for the Jnani, you can sweeten the dryness of Jnani, of the path of knowledge, by understanding and always knowing that the nature of the one without a second is Satchitananda. That when it does manifest, that is what it manifests. It manifests a divine love. A divine love means it has no direction. It has no particularity. It's just love emanating itself in all directions equally. That is what awareness is. That's what the awareness is within you. And that love leads to an expression called wisdom. That love is what teaches wisdom. Love is what guides to wisdom. And so even on the Jnanic path, this prayer, as it were, this meditation on what for the bhakta is God, is also for the Jnani the awareness of awareness, with the knowledge that awareness is impregnated by Satchitananda, that everything is a manifestation of love and wisdom, and to learn to see that. That this prayer was nothing else but the sense of the presence of God, his soul being at that time insensible, which means not paying attention to anything but divine love, because it is divine love that produces our inner peace. It is the divine love which contains within it divine grace that allows us to silence the mind, that allows us to sit in peace before our ideal, without feeling shame, without feeling remorse, without feeling discomfort, restlessness, all of those things. It is this meditation on divine love that brings us to transcendence, because this meditation on divine love allows us to see the moment as it is, and not as our mind tells us that it is. It is this meditation on this divine love, or the awareness and its nature, that brings us to freedom, that allows us to set down the suitcase of our karma that our mind carries with it all the time, right? It becomes your purity. It becomes your strength. It becomes you. Truth be told. His soul being at times insensible to everything but divine love, and that when the appointed times of prayer or practice were past, he found no difference, because he still continued with the divine, praising and blessing him with all his might, so that he passed his life in continual joy, yet hoped that God would give him somewhat to suffer, that he should grow stronger. That we ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed. Right? That is the measure, that the light that God looks at your actions with. Not what you're doing, not the greatness of the work, not the size of it. You think of that little chipmunk, if you know that story about Rama's bridge to Sri Lanka, all right? And the little chipmunk, I only know him because of the cartoon about the Ramayana. But that little chipmunk, that the only thing he could do, what can a chipmunk do to help build a bridge? Well, he would go and he would roll in the dirt, right? And get all those pieces of dirt in his fur. And then he'd run out to the far end of the jetty and he would shake off all the dirt onto the end of the jetty to help build this bridge. And Rama was so pleased that he sat down and blessed him and stroked him. And that's why chipmunks have those stripes on their back these days. See this, why that story, whether it's true or not, who cares? Utterly not the point. The point of it is that there was a devotee there who looked at a chipmunk and thought of God and thought of the divine love of God and saw the stripes as being a symbol of that love of God and that appreciation of the God. That's what we're talking about here with Brother Lawrence. Interpreting the world through the presence of the beloved, interpreting the world through this knowledge of the reality of this moment with no stories or narratives supplied by the mind to tell you what the world is. So don't ever be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of our work, but the love with which it is performed. That we should not wonder if, in the beginning, we often failed in our endeavors, but that at last we should gain a habit which will naturally produce its acts in us without our care and to our exceeding delight. Right? That it shouldn't be a mystery if we fail. Right? Brother Lawrence has only two principles. He says, if in the moment I realized I wasn't doing something for the beloved that I should be doing, I just did it. And if in the moment I realized that I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing, I stopped it. And he said, that was my whole philosophy. That was everything. I just lived my moment purely in the presence for the sake of that presence and left out all the other narratives. And that we shouldn't be amazed that we fail because we've been in wrong habits for me, 60 years. And when you've got wrong habits that are 60 years, even knowing them is very difficult. Even being able to see them is difficult. But if you keep that divine light, yes, Uma, unmute yourself now.
Could you expand that idea of doing those two things? Could you repeat what are those two things you say?
The two things I said.
To do everything without something.
Oh, yes. Okay. That we ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of the work, but with the love with which it is performed, right? Okay. So that we pay attention to the love of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And if we don't particularly like licking envelopes in a cubicle at the job, then we stop licking envelopes and we start kissing God on an envelope. I don't know. Oh. And laying it on the shrine of your desk and offering this beautiful envelope to the divine. But it's this constant love what you're doing, whatever it is, love it. Don't wonder if you love it. Don't decide whether you love it. Just love it. Just determine this mundane thing I'm doing right now, I'm going to do with such excellence and such focus.
And also not scrutinize how you're doing, right? I
Right.
not analyze.
Yes. No, don't do much thinking at all.
Okay. Okay.
Just be aware of the presence and let what happens when you're aware of the presence happen. That's the best guide.
Thank you.
Let the presence become the inspiration for how you're actually doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And not to wonder that we're going to fail,
Uh,
but know that even through your failure, you're producing a habit. And this habit's going to mint gold. Hafiz, that Persian poet, that Sufi poet, has a wonderful statement about learning to live life in ways that mint gold, to take your moment and mint gold with it. And so always come up with ways for doing that. Pay attention, like Vivekananda says, on all the positives. Discard the negatives. Yes, you failed. So get up and go again. Nothing more than that. He says the whole substance of religion is faith, hope, and charity. Right? Satchitananda. That's all of religion. Right? By the practice of which we become united to the will of God, that all beside is indifferent, and to be used as a means that we may arrive at our end and be swallowed up therein by faith. Faith in what? Faith in the possibility that there is divine love that's beyond condition, that is ours, and that we can let go and lose our fear and lose our separateness, which is really created by an ego that was just made to give us comfort in delusion, a comfort in not knowing, right? And to stop taking refuge in that and to be aware that we know nothing and we need know nothing except the presence, except our nature, Satchitananda. That when we enter upon the spiritual, we should consider and examine to the bottom what we are. So that when we ever enter the spiritual ideal, anything spiritually, it becomes spiritual through the examining of what we are all the way down, coming to know your nature from the bottom up by going inside, quieting the mind, going beyond mind, which is the hardest thing to do because we don't have any self-control. We have no mind control. We're so accustomed to following it where it goes that when we try and put a leash on it, it won't sit still. And so this is the trouble. So we have to that's where our practice comes from. When the mind wanders, just bring it back. Just bring it back. Just bring it back. That's all you can do. And to live life in this way, to live life in this light, to come to the understanding that you fundamentally are the light of awareness, which emanates the light of love, and that the film strip of time runs through you, the unchanging light that you are. The film strip of time runs through you, and its movie is shown on the mind. Right? And you always remember, I'm not the film, I'm the light of love, the light of awareness that shows all films, not just one film. And in that knowledge, we expand. And in that knowledge, we find love, express love, and become love. And that is Brother Lawrence, the path of Jnana Bhakti. If anybody has any questions or anything to say.
It's such a wonderful thing. Even though you said it is humorous, no, you gave the highest practice, like spiritualizing your daily life, in such a short and beautiful way. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, yes. Mother is never complicated. Yes, that's the thing. We don't have anything to learn. None of us need another lecture. What we need to do is to believe any of them. That's all we need. Sri Nisargadatta was asked that question, right? The student was asking, he says, you're enlightened and I'm sitting here ignorant. What's the difference between us? And of course, Nisargadatta says, there's only one difference between us. He says, when my teacher leaned over my shoulder and whispered into my ear, thou art that, I believed him. You thought you had something else to do. You see, so spiritual practice, spiritual life is not difficult. It's that we give it difficult narratives and believe them, right? One of the narratives that comes up the most, it comes up almost every single time there's a Q&A session, actually. Oh, my mind is so noisy. I can't quiet the mind. I can't meditate. You know, meditation is so difficult. Well, what you've done is created a narrative in which meditation is difficult and you can't quiet the mind. So every time you go to meditate, what's the mind going to replay? Oh, meditation is difficult and I can't be quiet, right? That's why we have to get rid of these narratives. If you write these narratives about yourself, you will have to live them. That's how karma works, right? And so the narrative that we want to write is constantly about the presence, about the graciousness of this divine principle of love, which is found in the awareness that we are at our core, right? That the nature of that awareness. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be too difficult. Yes, John.
Earlier, you had talked about the Shakti and mind. I was
Yes.
interested in your maybe clarifying that relationship a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, it comes from the idea, Ramakrishna says that pure mind and Brahman are the same. All right, so a mind with no me and mine in it and Brahman are one and the same. When you put a drop of me and mine in the mind, it becomes active. It becomes the power of God rather than just God. It becomes the power of God, right? It becomes the manifested universe. As soon as you put a drop of me in mine, that's an infection, a virus of wrong thinking so severe that the entire ocean of the mind just immediately turns into sequences of waves and whirlpools and creates an entire prismed universe from that wrong understanding, me, mine, right? And so you have Shiva, or you have Brahman, you have the one without a second, which is pure mind, the mind of pure potential. There is no me or mine in it. There is no particularity actually at all. And everything is all at once, all possibilities, right? When you put an idea, the wrong perspective of me and mine in it, it becomes Shakti. It becomes the disturbed mind, which is the manifesting mind, which is the mind of vibration, word. You know, it becomes objects, becomes perceived as objects separate from ourself. So you've got Shiva and Shakti in you in both of at the same time. So most of us, our mind is where we experience Shakti, where we experience the world of constant change. But behind that, you know, behind noisy mind, and we talk about it only in that way just to put a handle on it, but behind noisy mind is the shrine of the heart. And the shrine of the heart is the unchanging divine principle. And that we try and take our identification out of the world of thoughts, because thoughts are what the universe is. Thoughts are what create everything. And so we try and remove our sense of self from being in the world of thought. So we take that idea of living as the thought of ourself, we eliminate that and start living spontaneously, silently, from the inspiration of the love that we're aware of within ourselves, which we could call God, which we could call presence, which we could call awareness. All of those things. We place our awareness on that unchanging presence, that isness, and we observe. And if we can hold our presence here, this is where our enlightenment awaits us, right? Enlightenment is not something we're building or achieving. Enlightenment exists with you already, because it is simply what you are. You just have to move your awareness of self from here to here. Stop thinking about it and start allowing expression of it.
So then, based on intention, you're using the mind or Shakti, the world, to transcend it.
Yes, of course, we're using one thorn to take out the other thorn. That's also true. But your first error is to have intention. Intention requires living on a line. You can't have intention on a point. right? Intention requires narrative. And so you just do isness. You sit,
Okay.
you know, you sit and allow, but but awake, aware of what's going through the mind, aware of what's happening in the body, aware of how they're interacting, aware of the memories they're inducing, aware of the narratives that are arising and falling. You know, through that awareness is how we resist being trapped, being caught in them. Right. And so it's that presence that helps us maintain that awareness, maintain that freedom from getting caught in a narrative that comes out of the past and causes us to repeat our karmas over and over and over and over again. All right. Well, my friends.
I like the description of point rather than present. See, present has a lot of space, whereas a point doesn't have space.
Yes, that's right.
You will fall down.
Yes. And oddly enough, that's how we live. We just give it a different description, which draws us into delusion. We've never been anywhere but here, and we've never been at any other time but now. And you can't get a more particular point than here and now, right? And it's understanding that fact that you are always here and now, regardless of what is the condition of senses, condition of mind, condition of thought, which is what changes the here and changes the now, right? But there's a here and now that's inherent within you that is always the same. That's how we have that's why we have those words, here and now, right? And that is a point. And we're always living on that point. All we have to do is become aware, come out of the stories that require past and future, and come back to the point, the only thing we've ever experienced, the only thing we've ever acted in,